The Phone Box. Written by Daniel Burnett. Voiced by Hurricane. Pam perched on the inch-thick cushion at her bay window. Her chin rested upon her knees, with her arms wrapped around her legs for something to cuddle. Tears silently descended her cheeks as she sat frolicking through countless wonderful memories of laughing and playing with her mother. Her toes scrunched into the fabric beneath her as her eyes scrunched shut in an attempt to stop the flow. When she reopened them, they were met with another memory. Her father was stood outside again. For the past 4 days he had spent most of his time out there. Pam had lost count of the amount of time she had brought him back inside and made him a cup of tea. She had normally gone out there to retrieve him upon seeing him out of the window, but this time she stopped herself, if only for a few minutes. Partly because she was tired of doing it. A 10-year-old shouldn't be looking after a grieving father on her own, and partly to observe what he actually did out there. He stood adjacent to the old phone box across the barely used road outside the property. His head was facing the floor, whilst his slightly leaning body was propped up by his hand gripping the red metal box. She could see, even from her window 30 feet away, his shoulders bobbing from sobbing to a rhythm of heartbreak. She decided that he did this for 2 reasons. Firstly, her father was a caring man who would not want to be repeatedly upsetting his daughter with the sound of his uncontrollable weeping. Secondly, this was the phone box that should have worked. It was old, yes, but despite living in the house for some 8 years, the phone box was never used by this family, except for the one time it was needed. Pam's mother had gone into cardiac arrest that day. She was a gentle soul, very playful and kind, especially towards Pam. To die at just 37 years of age is a cruel way for God to show off, and a cruel life event to throw at Pam so early on, especially in the way she experienced it. To shine some light on this horrific event, we should slip back 4 days. Pam was playing with her train set on her bedroom floor, trying to make 2 pieces of awkward track fit together. From downstairs, she heard her father calling out her mother's name with increasing volume and intensity, either side of blasphemous exclamations. Pam apprehensively got to her feet and slowly walked the planks to her bedroom door. Her father's voice appeared even more panicked now, triggering a more urgent response from Pam, who leapt down several stairs at a time in order to assist him. As her bare feet scuppered across the hallway to a halt, she was met with an emotional scene. Pam's father was on his knees, crying uncontrollably, trying his best to administer chest compressions to keep his wife's heart beating. He must have been doing this for about 5 minutes or so by the time he had noticed his daughter standing there, watching, with her bottom lip uncontrollably trembling. Pam's father was always so calm. This was the first time in her 10 years of life that she had seen him even close to rattled. He shouted at her to run to the phone box across the road and phone for an ambulance. Pam turned and ran at the front door, ready to follow her father's instructions, including the one she heard on the way out of the door, to look both ways before crossing the road. Even whilst in a panic, he considered his beloved Pammy's safety. Out of the door she burst, ran across the wet single-lane road to the old red box, wrenched open the door, clambered in to escape the light drizzle, and lifted the receiver to call for an ambulance. She frantically shoved her fingertip into the dial and ran it around to the number 9 3 times. The wait for a response seemed like forever. There was nothing. No response at all. The line was dead. She replaced the receiver and then picked it back up, hoping this time there would be a dial tone. Tragically, the response never came. The ambulance never came. From where Pam was stood, outside the telephone booth, with the droplets dripping onto her periodically, she slowly drifted sideways, panning the hallway of her house back into view through the frame of the still open front door. Pam will never forget the heavy aching feeling in her chest as she watched her father run out of energy and the sound of his exploding bursts of crying. He looked up for a moment, straight at Pam, and screamed with pure pain. He clambered to his feet, exhausted, and made his way to his treasured daughter. Everything after that was a blur to Pam. From her windowsill, she made the decision to leave her father out there this time. Maybe she kept disturbing a part of the grieving process that he just needed to get through. In her misery, she decided that going straight to bed, despite it being so early, was the only thing she wanted to do. Gring gring, gring gring. Pam was shaken into consciousness. The distant but distinct sound of a phone ringing somehow shook the room, as if the unusual vibrations could shake off the new Victorian wallpaper from her walls. The bay window cushion looked more secure than her bed, and so without a second thought, she jumped ship and took position at her favourite outpost, where the phone box was now in full view. She opened the window a tiny amount, and the sound of the phone increased in volume, providing Pam with clarification that the phone box was the source of the noise. Gring gring, gring gring! She set both feet on the ground and moved them in canon towards the landing. Creepy crawly tiptoes led her to the stairs unseen, past her father's bedroom. He would almost certainly be awake, unless the exhaustion had finally caught up with him and forced him to settle. Avoiding all of the creaky stairs, which she had mastered through years of practice, sneaking to the fridge for a midnight glass of milk, she floated on point towards the front door. The house was silent, but for the ringing phone outside. Holding her breath, she slowly turned the door handle and snuck out. It was at this moment that Pam realized she had not put any shoes on. Not deterred by this, she persevered, this time tiptoeing across the road not because of sound, but because of broken glass. She bounced across the sprinkled sand and made it to the phone box, the ringing now an echo of itself that would no doubt carry on in her head long after the receiver was retrieved and replaced, probably all the way to sleep. Pam picked up the receiver and gingerly greeted the unknown caller. "Hello, 999 Emergency Services. What service do you require?" Pam, thrown straight back into 4 days prior, couldn't seem to help but answer as if the situation was still happening. Ambulance, please," stuttered Pam. Heavy gasps of breath could be heard down the phone instead of any normal response. Pam recognized the sound, unfortunately. This was agonal breathing, the sound a dying person makes, and it was her mum she was hearing. She just knew it. All at once the line went dead and the phone box was flooded with light. The source of light was from behind her, along with the sound of a fast approaching car. Quick as a flash, Pam ejected herself from the phone box and ran towards the house, the incoming car missing her by inches as it ploughed into the phone box with an enormous scraping bang at what looked like considerable speed, greatly denting both the phone box and the bonnet of the car. There was a moment when everything was quiet again, apart from the discreet sound of smoke billowing out of the car. Pam noticed that the driver was still alive and trying to get out of the car to escape the amount of smoke flooding in via the smashed windscreen. The man managed to pry the door open, and out of the wrecked vehicle staggered Pam's father. Escaping only with a cut eyebrow from headbutting the dashboard, his emotional pain was far more apparent. He faced the phone box and screamed. Pam, realizing that she should probably get her father inside, started across the road. "I will take you with me," he bellowed at the phone box. "You took my family away from me." "I'm still here, Daddy," whispered Pam, trying to cup her father's hand. But instead of acknowledging her hand in his, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a revolver. Pam, being too young and too naive to understand, kept repeating, "I'm still here, Daddy," over and over, trying desperately to get her father's attention. He raised the gun to his temple and simply muttered the words, "Daddy will be with you soon, Pammy." No sooner had the gunshot rang out across the night sky, the phone rang in the phone box. Pam, now understanding everything that had happened, simply wept, gave her father's bleeding forehead a kiss, stepped over her own slightly twitching corpse, and walked with flat feet back to her home. She walked up the stairs, past her father's room, across the landing, into her room, and sat back on her cushion in her bay window. She pulled her knees up to her chin and cuddled her legs and watched her father face the floor, slightly leaning with one hand against the phone box, watching his sobbing, bobbing shoulders, wondering whether she should go and get him inside again. Tears descended her face as she went frolicking through memories of laughing and playing with her mother.
Hey, it's Danny from Bedtime Stories UK. Just thought I'd say thank you for listening to our stories, and if you like what you hear, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, let me know what you think. Also, a huge thank you to Hurricane all the way from down under in Australia for doing the voiceover for that story. Bedtime Stories UK, bringing you horror from both sides of the equator. Oh, I've just made my head the earth, haven't I? Oh, my head's the earth. Shit. So, if you really like what we're doing, come follow us on Patreon, come become a patron from as little as $1 a month or something like that, where we can give you as many extras as we can. And you'll also go into the Bedtime Stories UK Toybox, where you could end up winning some great prizes. Thanks, guys.